So another area we really need to focus on when it comes to keeping the knees healthy as we exercise and progress our running is making sure we maintain balance within the lower extremity. What I mean when I say balance, I don't mean standing on one leg balancing. I mean making sure we have the right amount of strength from quads to glutes and hamstrings. So one thing I noticed is a lot of people are very quad dominant runners, cyclists, just regular people, to be honest with you, and especially true with a few new clients I've had recently. When we work on squats or getting out of different positions, it's so obvious that they even sit off a bench, they sit and they really are using their knees, driving their knees forward, using more of the quads and not getting the hips and the hamstrings involved as much. That is a recipe for feeling tons of stress and pain around the knee joint. So what we can do is, again, 3-to-2 ratio, quads to hamstrings. Actually, a research study that I did my senior year, my last year in grad school, was quad to hamstring ratio and its effect on lower extremity injuries. It was kind of interesting because the athletes that we found, we actually tested collegiate soccer players. The ones that were so far off, their quads were so much stronger than their hamstrings. There were several of them, when we tested them end of fall, they actually suffered hamstring strains and ACL tears within that spring pre-season, again, as they got ready for the following fall. So it was interesting. We had that data. We could see that. We were about to put a program in place for their next season when those injuries occurred. So it is something that is very relevant to make sure we're not always developing quads, we're getting hamstrings and glutes involved. So your exercises like your Romanian deadlifts, your single leg deadlifts, or laying on the ground, any hip bridging exercises are really good. It's one of those things where I say, yes, we want a 3-to-2 ratio. I don't think, one, there's no way for you to technically test this unless you're doing some isokinetic testing. And I don't think it's bad if you narrow that down to a closer margin. If we have 3-to-2 and we end up making that a 1-to-1, it's not like, oh, we're going to suffer injuries elsewhere. It's one of those things that we want to make sure we're not getting further away that strength and really overdeveloping quads, but getting stronger hamstrings and glutes that really narrow that margin is very important, especially from a knee standpoint. Because if you think of how these muscles attach, quadriceps, and huge muscle, very overpowering too for the glute and the hamstring at some points, depending on the movement. But these 4 muscles that come down engulf that kneecap and attach just below the knee. So automatically, if those are stronger muscles, if we think of, so my right leg here, those muscles are coming down over the kneecap, attaching to the lower leg, that's actually going to start to pull that lower leg forward. It causes more shearing and translation, but we need to make sure we have that opposite equal to some degree amount of pull of the hamstrings, because that helps balance out and keep that knee in a better centrated position. So a lot of times that mechanism for knee injuries, again, obviously you guys are runners, triathletes, distance athletes, aren't going to suffer most likely ACL tears or those things, but over dominant here pulls forward, stresses the ACL, meniscus, some of these ligaments and structures within the knee. So making sure you balance out. And if we are always overpowering through the quad on every step, that is allowing us to be more susceptible to hamstring strains, hamstring tendinopathy, a lot of different issues again at the origin and also at the insertion of the hamstring tendons, going back to piriformis syndrome, sciatic nerve entrapment. Those kinds of things are more likely if you are more quad dominant. So what I recommend is think more about the hips. Hips from a extension standpoint, teaching the hips how to fully extend, engage, build good strength at the glutes and the hamstrings. Can't hurt to work on hamstring curls, even though I do not love those seated machine-based exercises, but work on hamstring curls with the stability ball, work on your Romanian deadlifts, your single leg deadlifts, your hip bridging, single leg hip bridges and hip lifts, those kinds of things, because really spending good time focusing on that posterior chain is a very good strategy to help make sure the knees are staying safe as you start to progress with your mileage and pick up as you run and train.